Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So I just want to start off by thanking the organizing committee for this opportunity to be ACOR. I also want to thank my two amazing DCA, Iksan and Tori. I'll be presenting about the AP system and everything else that you need to know to understand the technicalities of this competition. Right. So what are we debating as, or like what format are we using? We're using the Asian parliamentary format. So as you can see in this diagram here, there's listed 4 speakers, but technically in each team there are only 3 people, right? So there's the government bench and there's the opposition bench. Each team consists of 3 members, and 1 member, either the first speaker or the second speaker, is allowed to give a reply speech at the end. So 1 person essentially will speak twice in the debate. Case building or prep time is 30 minutes long, no less, no more. And substantive speeches are 7 minutes and 20 seconds long. And each team can give POIs or points of information to the other between the first and 6th minute. And reply speeches are 4 minutes and 20 seconds long. So it's somewhat of like half the time that you would get as a regular speaker. All right, so that's the AP or Asian Parliamentary System. That's what we're going to be using in HSDC 2020. Let's talk about the general roles of each speaker, or the general role of this system of debating. Debate is all about persuasiveness. So all a judge is doing, or like all judges are really doing, is assessing which team did the best to persuade using any format of logical argumentation, or to explain that the motion ought to be carried out or rejected. So that's why you have a proposition team and an opposition team. And the judges do so as an ordinary intelligent voter. So they're not some kind of like super smart individual who knows all the facts in the world. They're just there to assess the debate as it is, applying a very small set of technical rules as well. So any way you would like to deliver your arguments or logical links, it's all accepted. And yeah, so which is why they're there to facilitate and not displace the analysis of arguments. All right, let's talk about each individual's role as a speaker. So essentially, there are 4 types of speakers, as was explained previously: the prime minister, the deputy, the whip, and the reply speaker. What does a prime minister do? They set up the debate. They give context, necessary definitions for a motion, parameters or framework, their stance, and a model or mechanism if it is necessary. So your setup is just clearly linked to the motion as a whole and should be reasonable, but also contentious or debatable. Keep in mind, you shouldn't restrict the debate to just like certain specific areas or countries or timeframes unless it is specified in the motion. So you can't just take a random motion, i.e., this house would ban cigarettes, but you say, no, we're only going to ban it in this fairy tale world. It has to be in the general sense of the word or in the general sense of the motion, we would ban cigarettes. And the second thing that a prime minister does is they bring arguments to support the setup. I think this is clearly explained by what debate is. So on the other hand, you have the leader of opposition, which is the first speaker of the opposition team. If the setup brought by the prime minister, which is the first of the government team, or the fact that they have no setup, for example, the leader of opposition then has the burden or the right to reset up the debate and recontextualize the debate for the judges, for them to understand how it's supposed to go. And they're also supposed to declare the stance of the opposition team, stick with the status quo, or bring a counter proposal or a counter model if they'd like, and obviously give some rebuttals against the prime minister or the case of the proposition, and also deliver their own arguments. Right, so now that we've gone through the first speakers of both teams, the role of the second speaker of both teams are generally quite similar. So what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to answer the rebuttal from your opponent, right? So if the other team refutes your points, you're not supposed to just ignore them. You're supposed to accept that they refuted them and give counter refutation. You're supposed to also rebuild your team's case, which has been attacked by your opponent, and bring new rebuttals or new arguments. So it's not very helpful that you just repeat the lines that your first speaker said, it is much more helpful and actually will give you much higher scores if you are able to bring new ideas and like new material, right? What does new material mean? You can provide extensions to support your team's case, but keep in mind that new arguments or new extensions doesn't always have to be entirely different. So what you can do is maybe your first speaker brought a principled argument. You can illustrate that better for the judge, and that would count as new material, and judges would credit that towards you. And obviously, you're also supposed to tell the judge why your team answered the most important questions in the debate, whatever those questions are, whatever burdens that your team has set up to prove. So that's the role of a second speaker or a deputy prime minister in the case of the proposition, and a deputy leader of opposition in the case of the opposition team. So whip speakers. Whip speakers are supposed to bring rebuttal. They're supposed to scrutinize everything from their opponent's case and reduce the persuasiveness of their material. And additionally, they would try their best to amplify the arguments brought by their other two speakers. The reason why is because you are not allowed to bring new material defined in the previous slide, new material including any line of argumentation that's never been explained by your previous two speakers. However, whip speakers are allowed to bring new analysis, precedents, and examples extending a previously established idea. So whatever your first two speakers brought, you as a whip speaker are allowed to bring extra explanation to that, and that wouldn't count as new material. That would just count as explaining further what your team means by that point. The last role is a reply speaker. A reply speaker only has 4 minutes, not too long. So really all you're doing is just summarizing the case that was forwarded by your team. And I like to call this as a, oops, sorry. Super sorry about that. Okay. You're supposed to provide a biased adjudication. Yeah, sorry, can everyone see my screen clearly? There was a pop-up just now.
Yes, yes.
Okay, cool. Provide a biased adjudication, so you weigh up your material against your opponent's material, and in a biased way, explain to the judge why your material is much better, and thus explaining why your team won the debate on any kind of metric, for example, the clashes that you brought, characterization that you brought, the context, and etc. So important notes, 2 things. Number 1 is that fulfilling your roles as a speaker, as was explained just now, will ease the adjudicator's way of like following the debate and will help your team to be competitive, but it won't automatically win you the debate. Like you can't just fulfill your role and expect to win the debate. Sorry, it's supposed to say second rank and get a higher speaker score. It will just help the adjudicator, but remember, the core idea of debate is to be persuasive. Insofar as you are more persuasive than the other team, you will have a higher likelihood of winning. And also, oh, sorry, let's just, sorry. We'll scratch the second thing here. Okay, let's move on immediately to the types of motions that exist. So there are multiple types, so bear with me with this one. I think there's like 7, 8 slides. But the first type is the this house would motion. There's no specified actor here. So it's just like, it's usually the government who is implementing some kind of policy, like this house would do X, like this house would implement this ban or this policy. The burden of proof that you bring is to explain, will the proposal solve the problems that you identify? And is the implementation of the proposal justified? And the converse is true for the opposition team. If you would like, you can take a screenshot of this slide. I don't think explaining the opposition BOP is that effective. I think you can see it from the proposition BOP. So the second type of motion that we have is a THBT, or this house believes that motion. These kinds of motions are value judgment debates, but sometimes it can be turned into a policy debate by adding mechanisms from the prime minister about how a team will do that thing or what the team envisions for that value judgment to exist. Yeah, and the position of a third party would be there and to analyze or argue in that position, unless a motion requires an actor, and I'll talk more about actor debates later on. And the burden of proof is very simple. It's just to prove whether or not the statement is true or untrue, or it's like for example, this house believes that prisons should be abolished, right? All you're doing there is to prove like, should they be abolished or should they not be abolished, or like believing that it should be abolished. And the prop bench doesn't really need to show why they would enact it. It's not a policy debate, it is a value judgment debate. So the other kind of motion that exists quite similarly to the this house believes that motion is a this house supports or opposes motion, right? THS or THO. The main burden of each team is to take a step back and observe, evaluating whether a certain phenomenon, issue, or trend is beneficial or harmful. So obviously, if you're supporting something in the proposition, you are proving that it's beneficial. On the opposition, you are proving that it's harmful. So unless it is specified, teams are to take the position of a third party, an objective third party, and to analyze or argue in that specific position. So you can't just say, I arbitrarily believe by my own values that this is a good thing. You have to base it or evaluate it based on a third party who is objective. So yeah, a team may take a step further and add a mechanism to support or oppose the objective of the motion. But realistically, you don't have to do that, or you don't have that extra burden to do that. That would exist, however, in a policy motion. Okay. And the next type is a this house regrets motion. So again, unless it is specified, it uses the perspective of a third party actor. Look at what has happened. So if you say that you regret something, obviously it's in retrospect of something happening. It's like you already know that it has happened. And you're trying to evaluate whether a certain phenomenon or trend or issue is harmful or bad according to the parameters set by the teams in the debate, which also can be challenged by the opposition team. The burden of proof is, why is this thing regrettable? And for opposition, vice versa, why the thing is actually worth it or has been beneficial in retrospect. Right. So the next type of motion is this house prefers a world. And I think this is where like a lot of teams kind of stumble or get a bit confused. The point of a motion like this is to discuss the creation of said world and whether said new world is preferable. So you are not talking about whether or not that world could exist. You are talking about whether or not that world is preferable to live in. So you have to compare the qualities employed in the new world with qualities that the current world has, or the status quo has, as we like to call it, and conclude why then that this new world is more preferable or not than the current world that we have. So pretty straightforward. You are not talking about the feasibility of that world. You are talking about the preferability of that world. Now, actor motions, this house as X or Y. So what you're supposed to do is you're putting yourselves in the position of X, right, as the actor there. So it means that you're supposed to analyze the motion by like in accordance to what that actor thinks or believes, right? So obviously like a motion saying this house as Democrats versus this house as Republicans would be different because they have different values and different prioritizations in the policies that they want to pass, right? If the debate revolves around practicality, that actor's benefit or X's benefit or gains should be the crux of the case of each team. Each team is supposed to explain the goal towards that conclusion. So the burden of proof is explaining, will the proposal achieve this actor's interest, or is implementing the proposal morally acceptable from that actor's perspective? Right. So another kind of motion is this house believes that actor X or actor Y should do this. And I think this is quite similar to the motion about this house believes that. Is just you're adding an actor to it, right? So you're putting yourselves in the position of a third party actor, not X, that thinks X should or should not do something. And you're supposed to analyze why X should be the actor to do or not do that thing, right? So this is a bit different from this house as actor. You are talking about a value judgment based on the actor. So it's like, this house believes that the feminist movement should do X or Y. Your arguments shouldn't be, I as a feminist will feel happy. No, your arguments should be, feminists should do this because of X, Y, Z, right? Because of these reasons. So look at it in the perspective of a third party, but you are still talking in the context of an actor, or like you are talking about the actor as the end conclusion. So the actor's interest is good to be discussed, but you should do so by explaining why that actor's interest is important to be considered in the debate. So there's a bit of nuance there in comparison to this previous motion, right? Okay, so that concludes all the motions that could possibly exist in this competition. Now we'll talk a bit more about the technicalities of the debate, one of which is a definitional challenge. So a definitional challenge is basically you contesting that definition to the adjudicator. So for example, if the prime minister says, the definition of an orange is like a house, right? Like, obviously that's weird and it's unacceptable. But the parameters by which you can make a definitional challenge are threefold. So number one, it's when a definition is undebatable, like basically they are giving an unfair definition to set up the debate from the prime minister. Number two, if it is self-proving. And number three, when it has absolutely no link to the motion, like when it absolutely just doesn't make sense and is completely not the definition that you were supposed to bring. However, there's a caveat here, because you should only challenge the definition when there is absolutely no other alternative for you. When you just like cannot debate the motion, you should challenge the definition. But if you can still probably debate the motion, it's probably best for you not to have a definitional challenge. So you can point out the unfairness of the definition. You can prove also why the definition should be the one that you set up in the Leader of Opposition speech. But try your best to refrain from definitional challenges, as it would just make the debate a bad one, and probably your scores would be bad as well, because it's just two teams arguing on the basis of a definition, not really arguing on the basis of logical links. Right. There's also this thing called a prop fiat, or a proposition fiat, which is an advantage for the government team to assume that all the technicalities are available and that the proposal will be passed in Congress or Parliament. I'm sorry about the text differences. However, a prop fiat doesn't assume that states have unlimited funding. For example, like this House would, I don't know, make infrastructure for the homeless. You can't assume that we can do this because we have so much money. You cannot assume that because obviously in the real world, we don't have all the money in the world. Congress or Parliament, or that like Congress or Parliament will give full support to this bill. What you are arguing for is explaining that Congress or Parliament is more likely to give support. Right, so let's talk about arguments and responses. I think this is the final few slides, so thank you for being here until this point. But basically, an argument starts off with like an assertion, right? An assertion is just the title of your argument. It can be in, it can be in the form of a question statement. So it's like, if the motion is about this House would create super soldiers, the assertion can be why super soldiers minimize the casualty in war. It could also be a deductive statement of the end goal of your argument. So it's like how the motion will cause X, like it will minimize casualties in war. So you are pointing out to the judge that this is the end conclusion of our side. Or it could also be a comparative statement, like which side minimizes casualties in war. Right, so that's an assertion. There are three possible ways for you to go about making one. The next part of an argument, or the bigger part of an argument, is the reasoning, right? How do you elaborate your statement? 5 ways. Number one, you have to explain why the assertion or statement is true. So for example, if you bring the principal argument, you have to explain why the principle that you use fits the context of the debate. So if you bring a practical argument, conversely, you have to explain the benefit or harm that you bring will be likely to occur. Number two is that you have to explain the importance of your argument. So why exactly is this claim that you are making important? So you can bring analysis of why you protect the most vulnerable actor in this layer. You can also talk about why it's the most important thing to do in the context of the debate. So it's like you basically talking about the argument in comparison to other arguments, or in the specific world that you are living in. You can also talk about exclusivity. So it's like why your conclusions can only be reached by your side. You can also talk about it in a comparative sense, like what's the harm on the opposition, or if you're the opposition, what's the harm in the proposition, and why exactly your case or your benefits will be better, or why your process will reach those benefits better. And worst case scenario analysis is just identifying the possible harms that might exist in your side and explaining why it's still better than the opposition's world or your opponent's world. And also, once you're done with the assertion, the reasoning, don't forget to link it back to the motion, right? So like why it's relevant to the motion, how it answers your BOP or burden of proof, which parts of your previous speaker's arguments are you strengthening if you are a deputy or a whip, and which part of your opponent's argument have you destroyed when you were making those arguments or when you are making those claims. The other type, or the other thing to do in a debate, is to give rebuttal, right? It is a response towards your opponent's arguments, so you can bring your rebuttal before you deliver your argument, or you can also integrate it inside of your argument. Most judges don't really care. The types of responses that you can have is an A-. So you're explaining why their argument is untrue. So you're challenging their characterization, context, and process to prove that their argument is in fact invalid. You can talk about exclusivity as well, why the arguments that the opposition team or your opponents brought exist on both sides. So it really is moot, or it isn't an argument. It's just a thing that exists on both sides. You can also question the importance of an argument at the end. Like you can say, it might be true. The claim that you're giving might be true, but it's not really important in the context of the debate. So it shouldn't be weighed up that highly in the adjudication. And something very, very effective is an even if. So you're assuming that their argument might work, but it's still bad because it will inflict even bigger harm, thus making the argument not only irrelevant, but also worse off for their side to bring. Right, so that concludes everything. Thank you everyone for listening to me talk for I don't know how long. But yeah, I hope you learned something new about debate, or yeah, and here are the sources for this slide. Right, I think I'm giving it back to the Orcom.
Okay, thank you, Acor, for the debate seminar. Moving on, we will conduct our last agendas for today, which is the technical meeting for HSDC 2020. I invite organization committee to take the lead.
Okay, so everyone, next organization committee will give explanation about technical white light. I hope that we are all in healthy state of mind and body, even though we are still in the COVID-19 pandemic. The situation of the race this time will be very different from the previous competition, because if the previous competition we face to face with the opponent and the jury, but because of the condition like this, then we are in a virtual race, but I'm sure that it will not reduce our enthusiasm. So let's we start with the technical guideline. So the first, let me introduce myself. My name is Maria Adelaida Watimena, and you can call me Maria. So this day I will convey matters related to the debate competition, which will be held on Saturday and Sunday. Okay, please move the slide. Okay, the first is that the daring competition. All competition participants, the judges, and the organization committee must use the Zoom and Discord application. So in the debate process will be carried out in the Zoom application, and you can do case building and get feedback in Discord application. Next slide, please. And then what would you do next? So first, you must download Zoom and Discord application on your device. You can get it on Google Play Store or App Store. And second, you must log in into Zoom and Discord application using your account, only by your account. Next slide, please. How about the day? So, first we talk about draw and motion. First, the draw and motion will be shared to all participants in TabyCat and Zoom. The draw tells you which team you are facing, what side you are, and what room you are. Second, after the draw goes up, you will need to change your username on Zoom to include the room number that matches the draw. The next explanation will conveyed by my colleague, Chandra.
Okay, thank you for the time. My name is Chandra Kirana Mario as an organization commit. So I'll continue the technical guide. Format first, format name. Before joining the debate room on Zoom, you have to make sure you change your name following this format. If you were in round 2 with room 4, for example, it would look like this. For debaters, round underscore room space your team name underscore your name. In example, R2 underscore 4 space HSDC underscore iflog. For educators, round underscore room space ADJ underscore name. In example, round R2 underscore 4 space ADJ underscore iflog. The debater will given 5 minutes to rename themselves before entering breakout room. The motion relays will not be continued until all participants rename their name. Next slide. Breakout room. First, you have to join the debate main hall room on Zoom by invitation link for the committee. After that, each team and judges will rename themselves as the format name as I explained before, and be assigned into a breakout room by host. You should receive a pop-up on your screen inviting you to join a breakout room. The breakout room is where debate will take place. Next slide. Debate. The debate proceeds on Zoom as a debate normally would. We highly encourage the debaters to keep their camera on during speech. When other debaters delivering their argument or it's not your turn to speak, you have to mute your microphone. Second, POI are allowed to be voiced with the condition that it should not overbear the speaker's voice. And last, if one member of the team drops out or cannot get back in, one member of the team is allowed to iron person or deliver multiple speeches. Please, Indra, to continue the guide.
Hello, my name is Indra. I would like to continue our technical guidelines. So the next technical guidelines is about deliberation. The following are some provisions for deliberation. First, once the debate is over, the educators will deliberate. If it is a sole chair, the judge should simply mute their audio and video and come to the decision. Once that is done, just unmute and deliver the oral adjudication. Second, if there is a panel, all speakers should leave the breakout room by clicking Leave Breakout Room on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Crucially, when the pop-up appears, click Return to Main Session. Do not click Leave Meeting. I repeat it again, do not click Leave Meeting. Third, this will take you back to the main room. Once the decision is made, committee will call back each room to return to the breakout room. Click on the Breakout Rooms button on the bottom taskbar and below and follow the options to return. Next slide. Okay, ballots and feedback. The following are some provisions for ballots and feedback. First, important note for judges. Fill out your online ballot before delivering the oral adjudication. All adjudicators will receive a designated URL for ballot submission in approaching the tournament. We are only accepting online ballots via Tabicate Heroku. Do cross-check on all the information on the ballot to ascertain it is filled correctly. Second, we highly advise teams to do feedback on the judge as soon as possible. The committee will give you an online form to fill the debaters' feedback on Discord main channel. Do it quickly or give it in another platform so that the host can soon close the breakout rooms and prepare for the next debate. Next slide. And the last is about technical problem. The following are some provisions in case of technical problems. First, if a speaker disconnects or is incomprehensible, the chair's timer is paused. The speaker is allowed to use the remainder of the speech if they return within a reasonable time. Second, if the speaker cannot return, another member of the team may step up and deliver the remainder of the speech. Third, if the chair disconnects in the middle of the debate should pause immediately and stay paused until the chair returns. If the chair doesn't return within 5 minutes, a member of the debate should contact the host in the main room using Ask for Help. Okay, that's all our explanation about technical guidelines. If there are things that are unclear or incomprehensible about our technical guidelines, please ask us so that we can avoid possible mistakes during the tournament. Thank you.
Thank you, Organization Committee. I hope everybody are well informed about HSDC 2020. If you still have any confusion or question, please do ask or contact our committee. Okay, now is the Q&A session. If there is any participant that would like to ask something regarding the seminar or the technical meeting, we do encourage you to ask it right now.
Okay, so I have a question about what if when we in the middle of speech and then we disconnected accidentally, who should we tell them to make us in the room again when we can join the meeting?
Oh yeah, okay. So I'll try to answer the questions. So if there's a if you're talking and there's someone got disconnected because there's an LO and chairs timers in the breakout room, so we will eventually see who is disconnected, and then the chair's timers will pause the time. So basically, you don't have to tell anything if someone got disconnected from your team or the opposite team.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I add to that point a bit? There's also a reasonable time of until when does one of your, for example, teammates have disconnected from the competition. So we will not going to wait for that long time. If, for example, your other speaker is not going to join the room back in a I guess in a short notice. But I do believe that it's either 1 minute or 2 minutes, or maybe from your chair agreement. based on the discussion happening on the room itself. Yeah, I guess it's like that.
Okay, thank you.
Is there still any of you guys who have question? Feel free to ask. And that's a wrap for today. Thank you everyone for gracing today's event with your presence. We truly appreciate it. We hope that tomorrow all of you will be prepared and ready to start the tournament. I wish the best experience and result for all of you. See you tomorrow. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
See you tomorrow at competition, guys. Good luck. Good luck all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
.com.
Thank you. Oh. Oh yeah, I would also like for the outcome to stay in the meeting room.